So pleased that we've got this wonderful chat with us this evening. We have William, in brackets, Bill Tabone, and he's our wonderful friend from Australia. I'm so pleased that you've made it. Please step up from the green room and take to the stage.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Caroline. I'm so happy to be here. I'm sorry, again, my apologies for the delay. Sometimes this time travel thing, being over in Australia, can slow us down a little bit. But I hope you enjoy what I've got to present. Okay, Ghost of Aradale. The asylum, that's the old girl there in front of us. Aradale was the biggest asylum in the Southern Hemisphere up until its closure in 1993. It opened in 1863, I think, 1865. I'm sorry, the brain's still coming out of the fog at the moment, so I apologise. It had at its peak, it had around 1,000 patients and up to 500 staff. It had 13,000 deaths during its time through its operation. The asylum itself is an amazing location. Like, it's just the size of the sheer size of the place is amazing, consisting of around 65 buildings. I'll go through that's a little bit of an old picture there. And if I could talk about this, we spent a lot of time in the asylum itself, so much so that we've had many experiences. And this is actually a book I wrote a few years back regarding our experiences there. Some of them are just truly I always say there's things that we have experienced, not just at Aradale, but in a lot of places. I'm sure a lot of you would agree that if you put them up in a movie, you would think, oh, that's not real, but it is. They're absolutely real. But most and a majority of them I experienced firsthand. Some are from people that were with us on investigations, and some are from people that I took in there as a tour to experience the location. That's a view of the asylum from the air. As you can see, it's quite extensive. It's a rabbit warren. So I always say for people to go there during the day, they do have day tours and have a bit of a wander around, have a look around. It's an amazing old place. Everything from up for example, in this picture, if we were up in the top left-hand corner there, there's actually the morgue. On the right-hand corner at the top there, you have the nurses' quarters. You have wards and hospitals and workshops and such all through this whole building. But what happens is, I always say to these people, Aradale feels like it's alive. So during the day, it's one thing, and then I would say it changes. It becomes a different beast when it gets dark. So it's a completely different experience when you're there with no lights, with no daylight, etc. It's a completely different experience. It is a rabbit warren. It's so easy to get lost in there. We spent a lot of time there. As I said, we used to actually spend weekends. We would go in on a Friday, and they would and come out on a Sunday or a Monday, depending. We would sleep there. We would investigate pretty much 24/7. So we would have cameras and equipment set up for the whole weekend. There was no one else in there, and some of the experiences we had, we were blessed with what we had. Now let's continue. All right. So what I want to do is I want to go through each of the areas and give you, as you can see, I've got some little notes, little wordings there, and to give you some of our experiences about what we have come across. This is the admin building, or the front of the building, where the people would be admitted. They would come in, walk in through the front door, and some of them would never come out again. So it's actually quite a, when you think of it like that, it's actually quite a sobering thought. Some people come in here and never left, and this is what we come across. Now, I speak about the governor. The governor, there's a place that had many governors that looked after the location. The location is actually about a 2.5 to 3 hour drive from Melbourne. It's in the city of Ararat. Now, the asylum itself is actually not in town. It's actually outside of town. So it's located up on a hill with the old belief that, fresh air and sunshine will help cure you. And so it's quite isolated from everything. The place itself was really a small town on its own. It had its own bakery, it had its own market garden, its own butchery. It had butcher, English language. It's fun. So, but it really was its own almost self-sufficient. But the governors changed quite often. I can imagine the strain that they were under. And there's one governor that actually was sent up from Melbourne and didn't last very long before he took his own life. And if you can see this window on the left here with the stained glass, that's actually from his office where he actually drank a bottle of acid. Not very nice, and I can imagine the death was not very nice as well. But one of the experiences that we've had in there, I've had it myself, is once you walk in there, you're in there a minute or two, and you will start actually you will feel your throat start burning. You will feel that uncomfortableness. It's not obviously as harsh as if you drink actual acid itself, but it's hard enough to make you really uncomfortable and quite not wanting to be in there. It doesn't happen all the time. I've been in there many times, and probably in 50 times I've been in there, it's probably happened 3 or 4 times, but it does happen, and I've had many people actually have the same experience. So it's not just one person, and usually it's, as I said, it's fairly quick. So that's for me, it's the spirit or it's the energy showing me what happened there possibly. That's my explanation for that. On the right there we have following a spirit. Now, I was in the asylum with my wife Amanda. It was daylight. We were just exploring, taking photos, and finding different locations that sometimes you don't see when it's dark. And we turned around. We're actually just in the doorway of the governor's office, and we turned around and we saw a gentleman in a suit, quite a tall gentleman, solid as you and I, walk past. I was like, that's really weird because everything's locked up. No one can get in here. There shouldn't be anyone else here. And we sort of followed. We just thought, where's he going? And we sort of went behind him. And the bottom picture there in the middle, you can see it's like a corridor with it's actually a walkway. Well, that door there was actually locked. And the gentleman walked straight through it and disappeared, just walked straight through it. And when he went through, he actually was not there when we looked through the glass. He was completely gone. So it's actually a really interesting part of the building, a little bit different to where the patients were. This is actually part of that building. There's a museum with things like the lobotomy tools, which I can imagine the energy that they hold, and the things we can get off them. So the admin building's quite interesting. Now the women's ward. This is probably one of my this area, the women's ward, I've had no issues there. There's whereas with the men's ward, there's actually something in the men's ward that I will talk about that's very, very negative. It's quite aggressive and has a dislike for myself, I'm afraid. I don't know why I'm such a nice fella, but anyway, what do you do? Okay, the women's ward. Well, as I said, one of the best experiences I've had at Aradale was in the women's ward. I had I would take tours in sometimes with investigators from different teams. They would come from different places. I've had people from all over the world come across to investigate, and I would organise a tour for them, take them through, and we'd do our investigation. Now, I remember I had a bunch of investigators, some of my own guys as well, and I'm a really big fan of using your senses, using your, experiencing the environment. So for me, it's not about sitting there staring at a gadget all night. I want you to experience the environment for yourself. Gadgets are, can read things, do things, but if you're looking at a gadget, you're missing the environment, you're missing what's around you. Now, we in the women's ward, I remember I had a bunch of investigators. And they were all people that were in the field, so they were, they had experience. So, but they had their gadgets out. And I remember I got a little bit upset one day, and I said, we were in one of the wards, and I said, in the women's ward, and I said, okay, put your gear away. Everyone, just put your gear away for a minute. And I made them all turn the gear off, torches off. We're going to stand here and we're going to just soak the environment up. I want you to see what you feel, see what you hear, see what you see while you're not looking at gadgets. So I put everything away. I had my back towards a row of windows, probably 2 or 3 feet behind me. I had the guys all in front of me, standing in almost a semicircle in front of me. It was a full moon, so there was a lot of light. There was a great deal of light coming through. It was actually really, really light. And I'm looking at their faces and just waiting for a few minutes. Just take it in, guys. Just soak it up. And all their faces changed. I said, wow, something's happened. This is after about 30, maybe 45 seconds. Something's happened. What's actually happened? I said, okay. What did you guys just experience? And every one of them actually witnessed a female spirit in a hospital gown walk across 3 windows behind me. And I didn't see anything, obviously, but yeah, they witnessed this spirit cross, and actually with all the light and such, I could see it perfectly, and every one of them saw it except me. So I always say that the spirits were working with me that day because they proved my point right at the right time. So it's an interesting. That's an interesting story. That's actually my favourite story. Now, the other thing we sometimes experience in the women's ward. I mean, these are some of the experiences. I've picked a few of the experiences. We obviously, being there for a long time, there's a lot of experiences that we had, not just myself, but my team members. And a good friend of ours, Sarah Chumachero, from Living Life in Full Spectrum, she was with us on an investigation, and I remember we were taking people through, and we were on the ground floor of the women's ward, and we could hear all these people walking upstairs on the floor above us. And I thought, this is not. I was a bit upset because there wasn't supposed to be anyone else in that building, and I said, and they were really noisy. They were sort of walking, and you could hear them sort of all talking, and it was quite loud. So anyway, we finished up. I went back to the to where we exit, met the guy that was waiting for me there to give him the keys, and I said, "What's the other group? They were in there. They were not supposed to be anyone in there." And he said, "There's no other group in the whole location. It was just us at that point. Everyone else had left." So yes, that was another really, really interesting experience. Here's a few more photos of the female ward. It has the asylum has been closed, as I said, since 1993, but they do still use this location for filming movies. They actually train police dogs through here. So sometimes you'll see a bench that's covered in dust, and you'll see dog prints all through it, things like that. So it's quite an interesting location. Okay, so the centre hall, the centre building, doctors' offices, and the recreation areas for the doctors and nurses. All right, so let's start off with the recreation area. This area where you're seeing here is upstairs in the centre building of the location, and to be honest, not a lot of activity, but a few things. When you get up there, it actually feels. It's more a feeling in there than anything else. It feels like you're in a party. The energy is like you're in a party. There's a lot of people around. Not that we hear or see much, but there's just the experience of being there. It actually feels like it's really, really busy. So I can imagine the doctors and nurses, they would have had their catch-ups and their music and their TV and all sorts of things. So in a location like this, they would have needed to, because living on site and working on site would have been a trying experience, I imagine. Okay, the central building, it actually has a large central hall, and on the picture on the left hand side there, you can actually see it's quite a large location, a large area. This place was used for everything from religious services before they had a chapel built, to people, to actual meals, to dances. They would have dances for the inmates and sometimes for the staff. So, it's quite an active location. I mean, this is a location where we can actually see the bags all there, where we would set up base when we're staying at the location. We'd sleep in this hall here. Now, there's a couple of things that we have seen in there, and other people, have seen that are well known. Now, this window up in the top there, the one that's not whited out, you can see it on the night vision photo there. Many people have experienced an old man standing in that window looking down. Now, I believe I've seen it once. I didn't capture it on a photo. I believe I've seen the spirit once, but it was quite quick. So I'm not saying I did. It may have been my imagination, but I know a lot of people that have. Now, the thing with this is there's actually a tower behind this wall here, and that window is on the stairwell leading up. Now, the only problem is that stairwell is so run down that it is impossible to walk on. It would collapse if anyone physical walked on there. So people, when they see this old man, are thinking, oh, there's someone in there, but it's impossible. It's actually physically impossible to walk there without it collapsing. A couple of the other things that we've had in here was we've actually heard voices, people talking. We're sleeping, we will hear spirits talking and having a conversation. We will hear music, we will hear residual sounds from when it was used for these other balls or dining, etc. So there's quite a lot of activity in there. One of the other things we've seen is a lot of shadow people, especially down near these doors to the back here, or at the front, I should say. That's actually the front of the building. Moving across, there's quite a lot of shadow activity and whistling. I remember, I can't remember. I'm sorry. I thought I did play this, but yes. My son Joseph, he's 23 now. He's been investigating since he was about 12 or 13 with me. All my family are involved in this. All my kids have been involved in investigating at some point, and it's which is great. But I remember Joe was in this hall with a couple of my guys. They were trying to communicate, obviously, with whatever spirits there, and they were whistling, and they actually received a whistle back, and they recorded it. Now I'm going to play if it works here. If you could hear that, it's actually the whistle that they received back. So let's see if I can get it working. Okay. Did you hear that whistle? Yeah? Okay. I'll play one more time. It's actually, this is not them whistling. This is actually what they captured. All right. So, that's pretty decent whistle for a spirit. All right, so this is also in that central building. This is the kitchen. So as you come into the central building and you head towards the back of the building, you'll come through a massive industrial kitchen. And you can see this kitchen had its own bakery, which is there on the right-hand side. It also had massive cookers. Obviously, it was cooking for, up to 1,600 people at a time, including staff and patients, and maybe more. There could have been other people there as well. There's actually quite a few things that experience in this kitchen. It's not active like some of the parts of the building, but it happens. As I said, this building has been closed since 1993. So what's that? 32 years. About 32 years, and we will walk in there and we will still smell food cooking, and it's not the same smell all the time. It's actually different smells, which is a little thing, but it's still actually really, really interesting because other people will pick up, certain people will pick up different smells. You'll smell bread baking, or you'll smell stews, or you'll smell something different, a curry. You'll smell different things, and it's actually quite interesting for that. But one of the other things that we have, or I haven't experienced, but some of my team have, and some of our guests have experienced, is an angry chef. I call him Gordon Ramsay. So, he's been experienced with a feeling of aggression coming at them, wanting them to be out of the location. A few people have witnessed some sort of physical manifestation, and say that it just looks like a man that's really shooing you off like this. Get out. So that's their experience. As I said, it's not something I have experienced, but it is interesting to think that after so long that he's still there preparing. Now, if we continue through the kitchen, we'll hit the basement, which is actually I say it's actually a half basement, because on the picture on the left hand side there, the outside is actually the bottom there is actually the basement as well. So when you come into the building, you go downstairs, and it's sort of half a basement, because the other part you can actually come outside. It's it is a strange location. On the right-hand side there, that little doorway in the middle, there is the stairway down to the basement, with the stairs there in the center. And you can see by the stairs itself, it actually is quite a creepy location, but it is all part of the, it's an asylum. So I think anyone who walks in there has that feeling anyway. But we've had quite a few spirits in there. Now, if I continue across, all right. One of the things we find in there is that people tend to get they get touched, so their clothes get pulled. Quite often they'll say my jacket's being pulled, or my jumper, or my shirt. Something's trying to get their attention. We believe it's actually probably a couple of children that we find down there that we've made contact with. They are sometimes witnessed, people will sometimes witness shadows. Again, it's down this location. You can see there's little doorways, there's all little rooms. It is a bit of a rabbit warren, and people, if you wander around there, you really do need a light, because it is pitch black. And so people that tend to get touched quite often in there. I've never had anything. I've never had people experience anything that's actually hurt them, your usual scratching or biting or anything like that, but, physical tugging and pulling, etc. One of the other things, as I said, is shadow people. Throughout the building, throughout the whole location, it's full of shadow people. So, but in some places it's more prevalent. This is one of those places where we tend to see these shadows moving around. Now, I talk about children. There's actually quite a few spirits that we've made contact with here. There's actually two children, a boy and a girl. They're quite young. They're probably about 8 or 9, and they are down here. We really, well, there are some theories and some contacts and information we found that leads us to believe that they were possibly murdered down here. There is another spirit who's quite aggressive. We call him the governor. Not the governor of the location, but he was like he likes to be in control. He's very aggressive. He's quite a nasty piece of work. People have seen him. We get him coming through our devices, and he's very aggressive. We felt him. There is a feeling of being threatened when he's around. He is a nasty piece of work, and we believe in real life he would have been violent. And in some contacts, it's been alluded to that these children he actually killed these children. Again, we have not been able to find any actual written proof, any records of children even missing. So, in the old days, I believe things were covered up, and that possibly this did happen. But there is another spirit there, which is of a young girl, a young lady, who was actually she was a patient. She used to work in the kitchen there, and this is where they kept their stores. She was in love with another patient. They used to meet down here, so they had their relationship hiding, basically. So she pops up now and then. She's quite pleasant, but and she doesn't have contact. She doesn't see the other spirit. She appears to be on her own. So contacts with her have been through mediums and through our devices, so recordings, spirit boxes, any sort of ITC communication that we might play down there. It's quite, it's a great location, great part of the location. All right, this place here is probably one of the nastier places in the location. Now, you can imagine an asylum is full of souls that are lost there. Any spirits that are there are lost. They can be when you pass, you don't automatically heal. You don't automatically become an angel. You are basically the same personality. And some people, when they cross, I believe, don't, whatever your own belief is, I'm not sure, but if I say when they pass out, it automatically cross over to where they're supposed to be. The confusion, the fear, the whatever the mental state might be can hold people here, and I believe that's why people get stuck. But there could also be that some people are stuck because they are afraid to cross over because they fear judgment. The old, if you're a bad person, you're going to go to hell, you're going to be judged, you're going to go to hell. Whether that's true or not, it's what people believe. And unfortunately, I believe people's belief can actually affect them out when they leave their body, when they pass. But having said that, we'll get into some stories. Some aren't too bad, but there are a few really nasty stories about this place. During one of our first investigations there earlier on, actually, let me clarify. We investigated this location before they were running tours. So before it was open to the public, we were able to get in here. We had permission. We come into the location. And I will tell a story about that later on. But when we were here earlier before the public were in here, we actually would hear several times actually in this location up on the first floor, we would hear a woman and a baby. So a woman comforting a baby is crying, and we could hear this. And there's no one else in the building. There's no reason for anyone to be there. The location is miles away from anywhere, so you're not going to have a sound traveling, 1.5 kilometers, 2 kilometers away from any other building outside of the asylum. And I thought it's really strange that, why you would have a woman spirit in this building. Well, the last 20-odd years before the asylum closed down, they actually had men and women both in this part of the building. So that makes a lot of sense to me, and it made a lot of sense after we found out, after we experienced this, we found that out, and it actually made a lot more sense why there was a female spirit in there. So yeah, so the woman, it's actually quite sad. But, I'm not sure whether it's intelligent or residual. I believe it's more residual than intelligent from our experiences. Now, Nate's experiences. Nathaniel, he calls himself Eerie Nate. He's the gentleman that runs the tours there. His company runs the public tours, and he was having an event there. We were actually helping him out one day, and there was during the day, and people were around, and Nate actually says he actually says he doesn't believe in ghosts, but I'm not sure whether that's true or whether he just says it to as part of his persona, or the perception for people. But I remember we were in the main hall there fixing up equipment during the day ready for the night to take people around. And someone come running in, Bill, Bill, Nate needs you. Nate, I'm thinking he's being, murdered or something. So I go running with them, and we end up in the men's ward here. And Nate's standing near a stairwell, and the stairwell's actually half blocked off, so you can't go up there. It's like a half board, about chest level. And I said to him, what's going on? He said, well, I was walking here, and he had someone else with him, and they saw a black shadow come running down the stairs, ran past them, and into the rest of the ward. And as soon as that happened, they got an overwhelming smell of rotting flesh. So he was actually quite taken aback. And by the time I got there, there was no smell, there was nothing. But I mean, being a gentleman that he is, and I've known that many, many years, he's a great guy, stand-up guy. He will tell you how it is. And he was in a bit of a panic, and I believe what he experienced, but it was very appropriate in that building with all the other things that happened there. Now, there's a few things. There's a few things in this part of the building that, as I said, there's an aggressive spirit that doesn't really like us, or like myself, I should say. We've had many encounters with something really aggressive in here. Later on, you'll actually see clip from it's not a great clip. It's on a very old camera. It's probably 12, 13 years ago. And you'll actually see we were conducting a Gansfeld experiment, and one of the guys actually gets grabbed and pulled along. I'll explain it later on, but it's quite an aggressive and heavy location. All right. So there's a couple of really, really interesting stories for this place. Know your limitations. This in completely blank. I'm sorry. The know your limitations. Basically, I'm sorry. Give me. I'm sorry. My brain's not working. What's the word I'm looking for? I'm so sorry. Let me change. I'll do the second story first. The rescue. All right. So during the day, we spend our time going through the various parts of the asylum, and we will run some sessions. We will do some EVP sessions. We will do some other sessions, depending on what we're trying. What our plan for that investigation was. Well, one afternoon, it was a Saturday, my daughter was with us. My daughter's actually a medium, as well as my wife. Most of my kids have got that ability. And I had a couple of my other guys with me, and she picked up on a woman who's stuck in the asylum, or in this part of the asylum. And she was telling us, and this woman was actually coming through on some of our devices as well, spirit boxes and things like that. So it was verifying what we were told by my daughter. And she was actually being held there. She was being held by something else, so a spirit. And there's, as I said, there's something aggressive in here that doesn't like myself. It's a male spirit, and he can be absolutely aggressive. In this case, she was being held, and we said, "Can you cross over?" And she said, "No, he won't let me go." And I thought, all right. So we went away, we made a bit of a plan, and by the time we got back, I brought one of my other guys in there, and we were going to help her move on. One of the things we do is we help spirits obviously cross over. We cleanse houses, what most people do. We have our own way to do things. So we went in there, and we had some gear, and we made contact with the girl again. The guy I had with me was one of my team, but he was also a medium as well, and we picked up with her, and we were having a chat with her, and she was speaking a lot more freely because it appeared the gentleman wasn't around at that point. Well, when we realised the gentleman wasn't there, I crossed this girl over. I released her. I got her to move on, and the gentleman must have come back at that point because everything went absolutely crazy. We had some EMF meters, like the K2s, for example, and as you know, they have different colours. Well, these things were spiking full, and all the colours had changed to red. There was no yellow, orange, green, etc. These colours had all changed to red for some reason. Sounds crazy. Sounds like I was hallucinating, but it wasn't just me witnessing this. There was a second investigator. A wind picked up and actually was gushing like through the building. Now the building's closed off. There's no one else in the building. It started building up, and was getting, the feeling of aggression was amazing. Now, I've trained martial arts since I was a young kid, since I was 10, up until a couple of years ago when injuries slowed me down, and commitments to other things. But so I'm pretty switched on. I've trained everything from police to military guys to just stand or normal people, and you get a sixth sense of these things. And what I felt then was that we were about to be attacked. We felt we were going to be physically attacked. So I grabbed my guy, said, "We're going to get out of here," and we basically backed our way out. And now, when you come out of this building where we entered and where we exited, there's a doorway, and then there's a small kitchen area, and then there's an outside door. And we got to this internal door. We opened it, and at that point, I knew we were going to be hit. We were going to be physically attacked. And I spun around, and instinct, my hands went up to cover myself, and I thinking I'm going to face something. I know it sounds stupid now, but that's how bad the feeling was. Anyway, partner at the time, the guy was with me. He grabbed me from behind. He's pulled me through the door. We exited out the building, shut the door, and locked it. And we did a spiritual. We sealed the door. Now we're standing outside looking at this door, thinking, what the hell just happened? When we hear the door getting hit, bang, bang, about 5 or 10 times. It was crazy, and not light. It was heavy, like something was punching this door. This thing was trying to get out. So the aggression of this spirit was something I've faced dark spirits, but the aggression I felt there was I've never felt it since. So yeah, that's probably one of the most hardest experiences to actually face that I have there, which is, and it also led to other things which we'll cross over shortly. Now, know your limitations. Okay, I'm back. So I don't know what happened there. Something didn't want to work in my brain. This was the same event that had Nate call me to come down and have a look at what happened, to him. There was people there that were able to go around and do their own investigating and things like this. And there was actually a couple of ladies, and I spoke to them and said, they were going into the men's ward. I said, just be careful. I said, do you know how to protect yourself? Do you know how to ground yourself? And they said, yeah, no, we don't worry about it. We know what we're doing. And I went, okay. So I'm standing out in the courtyard there talking to someone, and it's been quite a while. It's probably been a good 40 minutes. And I'm thinking, well, I haven't heard anything from these ladies. I might go and just have a quick look, because I know what this building is. I know how bad this part of the building is. And again, this is one of those stories that I say it sounds like it's from a movie. It's so strange. I walked into a part of the building, and to be honest, it took me a little bit to get there. I can't exactly remember where, but in the building. But it was something similar to this ward up the top here on the left hand side. One of the women was standing in the corner rocking, and again, it sounds like a movie. I get that. And another one was on all fours and just try reaching, just not well, like their something had affected her, obviously. So anyway, the one in the corner, she was not responding. She was just there rocking. It was dark. Well, we had a torch, but it was dark. So I'm a pretty big fella, like, pretty fit when I was a bit young. This is a few years ago now, before injuries. So anyway, I ended up throwing the lady in the corner over my shoulder, like I'm carrying her over like this. She wasn't a big lady. She was quite small. They were quite small people. And the other one that was on the floor, I actually grabbed her by her jeans, the back of the jeans, and lifted her like I was carrying a bag. And I walked them out. So the thing is, what I say here is know your limitations. Is these women said they knew how to protect themselves. They knew how to look after themselves. They didn't. And, by putting themselves going in there and not having the proper protections, they were hit. Now, once we brought them out and in the centre area, I had put them on the grass and we ended up doing a healing. It took them a long time to come back. They were really, really unwell, throwing up and all sorts of wonderful things. But it took quite a while to restore them to be okay to walk around and move around. Needless to say, they didn't go back in. They didn't do any more investigating after that. So yeah, the men's ward is absolutely crazy. All right, let's move on from there. We have the women's infirmary. So there's a male and a female infirmary. This is where the procedures, so everything from lobotomies to abortions, were carried out. You can see the building at the front. At the top there, that's the front of the building, and the hallway on the side here runs down the centre, and we have a couple of wards coming off, kitchens, offices, etc. Now at the bottom there, you'll see that's what we call a procedure room. Those two rooms at the two doors at the back there, the patients that were going to have a procedure were put into one of those rooms. So, for example, where the doors open, they would all wait in there. They would have seats. They would wait in there. And as they were being in the middle of this floor in front of us, there would be a procedure table or a procedure chair or whatever the procedures they were doing at the time. And as I said, everything from abortions to lobotomies, it was done here. And patient would be brought out, they would have the procedure, and then they would be put in the second door there to wait to be taken back to their ward. Now, this is all, to exit, you have to come through the door from where I'm taking the photo. So these people would come out of that little room, have the procedure, be put in another room, and then when they're coming out, they have to walk through the where the operations or where the procedures are taking place. To me, it's a little bit, not good form. It's not really well thought out. But having said that, we've had quite a lot of things happen here, and everything from conducting spiritualist movement experiments, where we've had people make contact and actually break down crying because they've related. They're being nurses and they're relating to the contact, etc. We've had a lot of things happen. One of the strangest things I've had happen was the music experiment, I call it. The hallway there you can see at the top right hand there. What we did is we investigated. It was probably about 4 o'clock in the morning, and I thought, you know what, everyone had gone to bed. I had one of my guys. We were about to go to bed as well. I thought we'll set up an experiment and we'll let it run. So I had a video camera pointing down the hallway, probably past his first door on the left-hand side there. And I set up a video camera pointing down towards the door. Now, in front of that, about 10 or 15 feet, I had a CD player. We put a CD player down there, and we put, I think it was Lion Butterfly, in the Garden of Eden. It runs for about 15 minutes. It's a long song. So we had that playing, and the rest of the CD, obviously. Now we go to bed, camera's running, recording all this. Several things happen. The CD player, actually, you hear it get switched off. You hear the button being pushed, and the music stops. Okay, my first thought is, okay, maybe it's run out of power, and simple, it's just shut off. The next thing you see up on the door, up the top of the door, a white mist, quite large because it took up a good chunk of that area, come out of the wall, crossed over, and went through the wall on the left-hand side. And that was all captured on camera. So that was interesting. But then we actually hear click, the CD player being turned back on, and the CD starts playing again. So that was an interesting experience in itself. And I thought, something to think about, because the CD itself wasn't Bluetooth, it wasn't that sort of thing. It wasn't at time. We didn't have that then. Or the CD player wasn't Bluetooth. It was actually a press button, and that's what I was hearing. Now, the next thing I want to talk about is a thermal camera experiment, which we did in one of the procedure rooms at the bottom there. We had someone sitting up about 3/4 of the way towards the back doors there, just sitting there and asking the spirit to come and hold their hands, that sort of thing. We had a thermal camera set up. Now, the person sitting there, you can see their heat signature, and then all of a sudden, there was a woman sitting there, and all of a sudden she says, "Oh, my hands are getting cold," and you could physically see. So she says, "Something's holding my hand. My hands are getting cold. It feels like something's holding my hand." And you could physically see both her hands getting cold. Both her hands were being held. And we asked the spirit to step back. They stepped back, and the hands started to warm again. And then we asked them to hold her hands again, and it happened again, which was interesting in itself. So then we switched people over, and we had someone else sit there thinking it was maybe they were imagining it. And, maybe our camera was just, we were trying to recreate. So this time we asked the spirit to hold one hand of the person, the new person that's sitting there. And sure enough, one of the hands, they said, it feels like it's being held, and the hand went cold on the thermal camera. So one hand cold, one hand warm, which is interesting in itself. That's it's just these little experiments to try to prove that these spirits exist, obviously, and make contact. Now, I spoke about people being affected. I have a thing called the infirmary effect, because it tends to happen in these hospitals quite often. We run it's an experiment that's quite spread around now. A lot of people do it, but I learned this from a group of my friends that I helped set up in the UK. They did a lot of spiritualist exercises, I think you would call it, and we call it the human pendulum. And it's basically what happens. We ask spirit to identify someone that they want to communicate with by affecting them, making them feel wobbly or such. And then we put them in the center and we ask yes, no questions. Well, in this environment here, we had I call it the perfect storm. What I had was a woman, which I didn't even know at the time, was actually a nurse. And she was in the center. She was identified. She was put in the center. And she, apart from answering our questions, she could feel the emotions from a nurse that is still there. And she actually broke down crying. So she felt everything from them. They're stuck. They felt frustrated. Obviously there was procedures, going on, that at the time they thought were right, but weren't very nice. So she had this download of information hit her, and she was spitting out the information as she was getting it. So from a spiritual exercise, this woman was channeling this information, but she had no idea. She was just there. She'd never done a paranormal investigation in her life. She was there just to experience what we were doing. We pulled her out. We gave her a bit of a healing, and she was fine. She was great. But it's the experience in this environment, in this hospital, that we get quite often. All right. So this is the men's infirmary. So we have the female infirmary and the male infirmary. The male infirmary, the female infirmary has been looked after quite a lot. The male infirmary is quite run down. It actually is not used on tours very often. It's sort of been neglected a little bit, I would imagine. But we've been in there. We had quite a few experiences in there, obviously. The main one that I find we have had is that we will hear people shuffling. You've ever seen a patient in a hospital, they're either elderly, or they've been they're on medication. They don't walk as such, but they shuffle, and you get that feet sort of as they walk. We hear that a lot in that building. And it's not just you'll be in having a chat, and you'll get this sound coming down the hallway, and there's no one there, etc. So that's the big thing that happens there quite often. But hitting Ragnar is one of my team. Ragnar is a big guy. He's a bodybuilder guy. He's a big lad. We had a group of my over there for a friend of mine who came from the UK there. Chris, he was out, so we set up an event, and we had people come along and did an investigation with us, and Chris was the one that showed us a lot of the spiritual exercises we used, and he was running one of these exercises, and Ragnar, I had him filming, so he's filming, and he's near a wall, and I saw him sort of bouncing, sort of rocking back and forth a little bit, and I'm thinking that doesn't look right. So I walked up to him and I said, now let me just give you a bit more information. Ragnar was although he was an investigator, he was very much a non-believer. He had to see it to believe it. And, he didn't use protection. He didn't do his groundings or any sort of protection as such. Well, I walk up to him and I say, "What's going on, brother? You don't look right." He said, "I can't move my legs. I can't walk. I can't move my legs." And that's why he was sort of bouncing off the wall, because he couldn't hold himself up. I said, "Okay, that's interesting." So I had one of my sons with me, Joe. He was about 16 at the time, and he's a big lad. He's 6'3", built. We call him built like a truck, or built like a lorry in the UK there, I suppose. He's a big lad. So I said, "Joe, come over here." We didn't say much. The others kept doing what they're doing. We just got Ragnar's arms around our shoulders, and we carried him out. Took him outside. I had to do a healing, and he said it was probably the weirdest experience he has ever had. He could not move his legs for want of trying. He could not feel his legs properly. He just had no control. He was completely out of control, and ended up, it took me a good 15, 20 minutes to get him to a position where he could stand and actually walk properly. But after that, he was much more of a believer. He learned a little bit of protection, and these things change people. All right. This is the men's ward as well. Just a men's infirmary. Similar setup. Up the top there, you can see the two doors. It's quite dark, run down. You can see it's a lot dirtier than the female infirmary, but it's still an interesting location. All right, the morgue. The morgue is an interesting place. It's it's right in a very far corner. You can't, it's quite a walk down there from the main buildings. And, back in the day when there wasn't refrigeration, morgues were kept, obviously quite a distance away due to, the health and smells, etc. Now, this, if you look at that top picture on the left-hand side there, the outside of the building, the tree there is actually a peppercorn tree. And it was planted there for a reason. Peppercorn trees hide smells. So, the smell of the bodies when there wasn't refrigeration was hopefully to be hidden by this peppercorn tree. Now, there's a couple of really interesting stories. To be honest, I find them all quite quiet. Not that nothing happens, but compared to the rest of the location, the morgue is reasonably quiet for me. Other people have had a lot more experiences there, but for me, it's quite really. But it's funny. My wife is a medium, and she had a vision. She had a picture pop into her head, and she actually thought about it for a while. She didn't mention it she mentioned it to me. She didn't mention it to anyone else. And it got the better of her. And about a month after we were actually at the location one time where she had this vision, she decided, I've got to find out what's going on. And she contacted Nate. As I said, Nate is the gentleman that runs the tours there. Nate's also, he's been a tour guide all over the world, and a historian. He's actually knows so much about these locations and, the research, etc. And she said to him, Nate, I had this experience. Now, the experience was that she pictured body parts being hung from the peppercorn tree, right? Which to me was more like just outrageous. You think that would never have happened. Well, first off, Nate was shocked. He said, well, how the hell did you know that? Because there's one mention of it in all his research of just a couple of words in a very small article, obscure article that no one would even find. But he found it, but he's never told anyone, it's never been mentioned. And he said, well, it was just a vision I had. He said, well, what happened before they had the freezers, they tried drying the bodies out. So they would hang them from the tree to air dry, basically. I don't know. It's a weird setup how that was. But for my wife to have that vision without knowing, I knew nothing about it. And I've researched this place extensively and I had never heard of it. But she picked it up, and I initially thought, you're imagining something, because you're not actually having a proper vision or proper information. You're imagining it. But no, she was correct. And it did shock Nate quite a bit. Now, there's a lot, as I said, there's a lot of locations in this place that are really active. As I said, I find this quite calm. And I'll start with the story on the right hand there. It says, a good day to be in the fridge. Anyone, Australia gets really hot during the summer. We can up to 45 degrees, 47 degrees more. Well, this day this weekend we were at the location, and it was summer. It was really hot. I think that day was about 39 degrees. And about 3 o'clock in the morning, it was still 37 or 38 degrees. And everyone had gone to bed. There was one of my guys, again, with me. I tend to be the last one running around, trying to squeeze every minute out of the location, obviously. And I thought, let's go to the morgue. And I climbed up onto the freezer bed, the morgue fridge there. And I got my guy to push me in, shut the door, and we had a camera set up filming the fridge itself. And his job was just to monitor the camera, make sure it was running. And if I started crying like a little girl or something, to drag me out. But anyway, I went in there, I had a voice recorder, and I'm in there asking questions. And to be honest, the heat outside. Even though the fridge was not operational, it was so much cooler in there. So I was starting to nod off. I'm thinking, well, I'm got to stay awake. Like, I'm going to fall asleep. So I'm lying in there, and then things started happening. I had shorts on, and I felt from my ankles, because I had shoes on, obviously, something was running like fingers like this up my legs. It would get to about where the shorts are, would stop, then it would start again. And when your hairs are being touched really lightly, it was that feeling. So that was interesting. I just took that as a it was a sign. Okay, something's happening, and I'm asking them to show themselves. And then all of a sudden, I hear whistling. So I audibly, with my own ears, I could hear something whistling in there. And I'm thinking, okay, cool. I'm asking questions, still trying to get them to interact and talk on the voice recorder. And I was probably in there a total of about 45 minutes and trying to stay awake, obviously, because, as I said, it was quite cool in there. And the little things were happening. Then all of a sudden, something right next to my head, obviously there's on the inside there, you can see it's all concrete. So right next to my head, something slapped the concrete super loud, and the energy felt really quite aggressive. And that's when I said, I'm out. I got pulled out, and we went off to bed. But, that was an experience in itself. But as I said, the location is normally quite calm for me, quite settled. And that was an interesting experience. But then you'll see M's experience. M is my daughter. She's a really good medium. She was one of the bravest investigators I've ever seen up until this point, where she had no fear. She was just fearless. Anyway, this is one of the times before the tours were running. We were in there in the location. We had access to the location. We were actually had the morgue drawer freezer open like that with the thing slid out, and we had some equipment on there, and we were playing a spirits box session and asking usual questions. One of the questions I asked was, is there anyone you like here? We had probably about half a dozen of us. And funnily enough, the thing said Bill, so it must have liked me. So I was I was chuffed with that. That was fine. I'm happy with that. And then we said, I said, and it's not a question I would normally ask. I don't know why I asked it, but I said, is there anyone here you don't like? And it said, Emily. And we went, oh, that's interesting. So anyway, we finished up our session, and we're walking back towards the centre hall where I showed you we would set up to change out equipment, etc. And Em says to me, there's something following me. She goes, doesn't feel right. And by the time we had reached the centre hall, she had become really ill. She is a small girl. She's not a very big girl. She was pale. She was white. And so I sat her down and I said, but just wait. It was quite a number of years ago now. So it was really sort of early days for her. And we weren't sure what was happening at that point. Anyway, she was there. She'd become really ill. And she said to me, I need to go to the toilet. And I said, okay, well, go on. So anyway, over there, she goes, oh, I don't want to go alone. So that switched to me. That really alerted me. This girl was never afraid of anything, but she wouldn't even go to the toilet on her own at that point. So anyway, I got her to the toilet. She had trouble walking anyway. So she went to the toilet. She came out. She looked like death warmed up. So I said to the other guys, there was, there's probably another 5 or 6 people there, all up, and they were doing their own thing anyway. And I said, look, we're going to have to go. She's not well. I loaded up my car. I put her, and I had my oldest son in there with us as well, loaded him in the car. I got in the car, and we drove out. As soon as we left the premises, as soon as we got out the gate, boom, she wasn't sick anymore. She was fine. Her colour had come back. She was fine. So something had taken a dislike, or the energy affected her immensely. That's not the first time I've seen it. It's not the first time I'll probably see it again. But for it to be my daughter and for it to affect her with her personality being so courageous, it was, to me, it was something quite nasty. But in itself, it was an interesting situation. Now, I think I'm running a bit over time here, guys, so I'll move fairly quickly. That's the morgue. That's the peppercorn tree down the bottom there, inside the freezer. And that's one of my guys, Tony. He's been with me many, many years, and a great guy, a really top investigator. Okay, staff quarters. I got so many stories. I could speak for probably full day, but I just picked, as I said, cherry picked a few. That's the staff quarters. That's where the nurses and the doctors would stay. Bottom floor was married couples. Second floor was females, and top floor was the males. There was some small rooms for them to sleep in, recreation areas, etc. Now, a lot of things that happen here, doors and windows, they rattle quite often. Doors will slam shut quite often. When it's still outside, it's interesting, but sometimes, breezes come in. As everyone knows. One of the experiences I had was walking through the place during the day. I had a group of people, about 4 or 5 people behind me. We were just exploring. I was probably about 10 or 15 feet in front. And as you can see, this hallway on the right-hand side here, I'm filming and walking, just taking some, B-roll for our clips and things. And I walk past one cell and I hear a woman say, hello. Nothing scary, nothing major, nothing nasty. She sounded friendly. And I've turned thinking one of the ones who were behind me were talking. They were all male. There was no females, but this was a female. And I thought, it come from the cell. So I thought there might have been someone else with us. We had other people with us at that point, and I looked in the cells. There was no one there. So to me, it was a friendly greeting. They've obviously seen us before, and the spirit just saying, g'day. The funny thing about this building is, if you're on the ground floor, you will hear running and walking on the floor above you. If you're on the first floor, you'll hear it on the floor above you. If you're up, you'll hear it downstairs. It's never on the same floor, running, walking, etc. I've put people on the top floor and on the bottom floor to try to catch things, and you'll hear running in the middle. And then I put people on all floors and everything stops. So the staff quarters is actually really active in this place. I'm trying to catch up a little bit. Okay, this is that hallway there. We actually have a footage of shadow. There's a lot of shadow people, but we have footage of a shadow people exiting one room and actually crossing over and entering another room, which was a great capture. This is one of the Gansfeld experiments we tried. This was during the day using natural sunlight. That's my daughter sitting there. We had some interesting experiences. People that did this with us, they experienced seeing people walking in front of them and things like that weren't there. They heard things, etc., which was quite interesting. Now, this footage here, it's really old, it's really grainy, but we're in the men's ward that I originally told you about. This is me sitting in a chair. As I said, it's really bad footage. There's 2 mediums behind me. These guys were there because they felt something trying to get to me. I had a group of people. We actually had probably about 15 people all sitting around watching this experiment, quiet, sitting on the ground. And I'll play it. And the gentleman there in the white pants, he was behind him. There's a doorway, and something grabs him, and he gets pulled towards the doorway. Luckily, he breaks loose. But it's not great footage, but it's interesting if you can see it. See how you go. Now, okay, at that point, something's pulled him towards that doorway, and that doorway is pitch black. There's nothing. That room is pitch black, and this guy has worked for me for many years, and I have total faith that was what happened. Now, at that point, I had no idea because I had headphones on, sound, etc., light. At that point, I was feeling something actually trying to grab me or squeezing lightly, not really hard, but enough. It's like I had a hand around my throat, and I was just letting that happen. It was an interesting experience. Now, when I play this, and I only actually really, to be honest, I only found this out recently because I didn't really concentrate on the audio, which is my own fault, which I normally always do. When I get a video, I actually separate the audio and look at it separate. Just after he gets pulled in there, there's a female voice, and I won't play it because it's actually quite rude, but it says, you C word. talking about this guy. Now, as I said, he worked for me for a long time, and I had, I trusted him with what happened here. But for some reason, there was something that wasn't real happy. All right, we'll keep moving. Forensics. This building is actually part of a complex. You can't see it. It goes back. It's actually the old forensic ward for the criminally insane. We used to actually leave the compound because it's all fenced off, the actual asylum, and actually walk down a little road to get to this. It's a great old building. We can't use it anymore because it has a lot of damage, and it's also used by other businesses as well. Now, we go in here, we do our sessions, and it's quite a very stuffy building. It's really heavy. Even in winter, it's really, really warm and really quite oppressive. So I would do our thing, and they would say to people, if you want to take photos when we're doing a tour, I'd open the door. If you want to go outside and get some fresh air, get some fresh air. Well, I had a woman who wanted to go outside, and my son was with me, Joe, and I opened the front door. And as soon as once I opened the front door, there's a gentleman standing there, quite short, in the old woolen suit that worn by patients. And he looked as stunned as I was. He looked at me and then went off to his right, my left. And basically, as he went off, he dissipated. He vanished. But I turned to the woman to say, well, did you see that? And her jaw was wide open. She obviously had seen it. Joe had seen it. It was a funny experience, but probably one of the best full-body apparitions I've ever seen. All right, there's a saying there, I don't know, mine's covered up, but it says, Gary Webb is a dick, right? Now, Gary Webb, it's actually funny. Gary Webb was a bank robber and a psychopath that was kept in this place. He was a self-mutilator. He actually cut his, excuse language, he cut his penis off probably about 3 or 4 times. Had they attached it? Eventually, they just didn't attach it again. They just put whatever device they use there for him to urinate. But he was not right. And but every time we went there, he would come through on our devices, and we would have an argument. He would be calling us names, and we'd tell him to back off, and there would be a fight. But nearly every time we were there, he would come through, and it would be this aggression. But it just shows that, these spirits aren't always nice. Spirits aren't always nice, and that's what we try to tell people. But the forensics area, interesting place, closed down now. Unfortunately, we cannot use it anymore. The chapel, well, the energy in itself, as I said, I'm trying to move through here fairly quickly. I'm running a bit behind schedule, I think. The energy in this place is overpowering. It actually makes people feel quite ill. We've made contact with, well, I say the pastor, but he could be a priest. He won't give us a lot of information, but every medium that I've brought in there has said this guy has not done very nice things. As you can imagine, in an asylum, there's unfortunate opportunities for bad people to do bad things. So we don't know whether he's done something to the patients or what the go was. But the energy in the place, as I said, it makes people feel ill, and it's very aggressive. Now, Joseph, Michael, and Patrick. Joseph sounds like I'm about to start an Irish joke, but Joseph's my son, and he, as I said, is a medium, and he actually picked up on one of our tours the names Michael and Patrick, and we weren't sure what he was talking about. Well, a couple of sessions later, we had found out there was 2 characters that actually work or hang around the place, look up to the place, and the names that came through were Michael and Patrick. So we figured that he'd made contact earlier on, and a few investigations later, we had these guys come through that we made contact with that matched, and he wasn't even in that investigation. So, it's interesting when you start getting these verifications. In the middle there, you see a dead bat. All right, so basically what the story with that is I had a group of investigators. I believe it was the same time that we saw the female apparition in the women's ward that they saw. Well, we entered through the picture on the right there. You'll see, or on the left actually, the doorway on our left is where we entered. Walked up to the back wall. I put myself against the back wall so everyone could come in, and we heard a slap right next to my head. I thought, what the hell is that? Turned the torch on. Only thing I could see, something hit the wall. All I could see was this bat. Initially, my thoughts are that the bat flew into the wall, knocked itself out, or killed itself and had hit the ground, which is unusual because bats have sonar. They don't run into things very easily. It's quite unusual. Anyway, one of the guys that was there, I knew him. He worked as an exterminator, so they got rid of bats and things like this. He come up and he picked it up and he had a look at it, and he said, "Well, this bat has been dead for a long time. It's actually desiccated. It's actually hollow. What I believe is something had thrown the bat and it hit the side here because something hit and then hit the ground. So that's the only thing I can think of, which is really an unusual thing to be thrown." I was always, it gives me a bit of a giggle. All right, let's the grounds. Okay, the grounds are interesting in themselves. A bearded man. People actually often, especially down in the car park, they'll see a bearded man wandering around who's not there. A lot of the time, people will mistake it for me. They will actually think that I'm down in the grounds there doing something, and say, ask me, were you just there? I say, no, it wasn't me, and tell them the story. So it's actually, it's quite an interesting, story. There's a lot of screaming. We've heard people screaming. We've seen shadow people. You can see the location. There's actually, you can imagine, what you would see there if you spent the time to just sit and look. But one of my, again, and probably one of my other favorite stories is the doppelganger. I don't know why I'm pointing at the screen. It must be getting tight. The doppelganger. That's an interesting story. Okay, so we were there, my team, investigating for the weekend. We were having a break. There's the centre hall, if you remember at the start when I showed you the picture, aerial picture. The main building's like a U shape. Then you have the centre hall. We were on if you're facing the hall, the right-hand side, having a break, all just standing around having a chat. People were, just having something to nibble, having a drink, etc. One of my guys, he'd been around a long time. He knows his stuff. He went to the other side to have a cigarette. Now, you're not allowed to smoke in this place, but he was being a bit cheeky and thought he'd sneak one. And then he comes, next thing you know, we see him coming back to us, and he's white, he's pale, and he's shaking. He's really, really upset. And he's a big boy. He's 6'4". I said, and, he's a pretty tough kid. Right? And we said, well, what's going on? He said, something just tried to get me to go into the building. Now, he was the investigator with me that when we let that girl go, when we rescued that girl. So this thing was trying to lure him back into the building. Now, what happened was he saw Mandy, my wife, come around the corner and calling him to come into the building because I was hurt. And then he heard me calling from inside the building saying, help me, I'm hurt, I need your help, And she's saying, you got to come in. But he knew we were on the other side of the main hall there. So this doppelganger thing was being us. It's trying to be us to lure him in. Anyway, I ended up grabbing a couple of people and ended up heading into the building just to see if we could see anything. We ended up turning on a spirit box, I think, and we had this spirit saying, we said, well, who are you? What are you? Etc. And he was saying, the devil, the beast, this, that, the monster. And I bet it wasn't the devil, it wasn't a demon, it wasn't nothing. It was a nasty human spirit. And that's what we came across. We pulled it, we told him to back off, and we left. Simple as that. But this doppelganger, this gentleman he was a dark skinned, like quite tanned, but he was pale. He really was in shock. So the location grounds can be just as crazy as the buildings, and you can see these locations. Now, one last one, I think we finish up here, was during one of our weekends, we actually captured 87 Class A EVPs, like magnificent EVPs, like us talking. 87. I've never, ever heard of that number anywhere. I've never had that number again. But the saddest one for me was we had come out of the back of the men's ward. We were walking back towards the hall and through in between two buildings, a lot of leaves there. I heard walking. I was thinking someone's with us. I turned around. No. When you listen back to the recording, there's a spirit that says, take me with you. So it was quite, and it was quite sad in the way it said it. So yeah, these spirits, unfortunately, some don't want to be there, but just don't know how to leave. All right. Thank you for listening to me, even though I was late. I do apologize again. I hope you forgive me. If you're not on our page, jump on our page, Australian Paranormal Society on Facebook. You can find us there easily. But I am going to do a little plug and say this is a new YouTube channel I've just started called Paranormal Explorers and Travel Planners. One of the things we do is help people, find locations. If they're going on holiday, they want to go somewhere, they want to go to the States. Where are you going? And we will find locations for them. It's just something we do. But also, we've got a bunch of videos up here from our adventures, from our events, from older events that we've run as well. We've got a lot of things come on there for you just to explore. So if you feel inclined, jump on YouTube, give us a hit, and hopefully we'll speak to you again, and I won't be late. I apologise. Please forgive me. Have a great day. Thank you.
Bill, thank you so much from everybody here in ASSAP listening this evening. Well, that's got rid of my first question that I was going to ask you. Where can people find you? So if people are going to create a travel itinerary, yes, do you do multiple different areas that they can book into different events if that's what they wanted to do, or is it just very specific ones that you would do?
I know, initially people can just say to me, I mean, really all it is at the moment, what I'm looking at is actually, well, I actually I'm planning on starting to actually take people on tours. That's sort of one of our plans in the long run, because one, I love to travel. So, and two, we love the paranormal. So it's sort of combined in our passions, you know what I mean, to do this. Kids are growing up, and such. So it's getting to a time when we can do these sort of things, but also it's a passion that I can help people. So it doesn't have to be on a tour for me. It doesn't even have to be on a tour at all. But someone can come to me and say, look, I'm going to the States. I'd love to, this is where I'm going to be, or this is where I want to go. And, if I know a lot of people in different places, or people that have contacts, I can say, look, have a chat to this person, they'll be able to give you more information, or I can provide them with the information. Just to, some people just don't know where to go or who to speak to. And that's really what it is. Just, your local paranormal tourist operation sort of thing, what do they call it? Traveler's aid or something like that. It's just trying to get people in the right direction.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. I am conscious of the time, and I know that there are people here that will obviously need to go and get their supper as well as you getting to bed. So I'm very quickly going to hand over to Christian so that he can ask the questions to you. But again, Bill, thank you so much. Next time, please let's record it in advance so that you don't have to wait up for so long.
Oh, well, I would be fine. I was actually I was in bed, and as I said, I still have a digital alarm clock, but I think the power must have gone off because all it was doing is flashing at me, and once I looked at my phone, I went into a bit of a panic. So I'm so sorry again.
No, don't panic. Honestly, it was a great talk, but thank you so much.
No worries.
Christian, would you like to ask some of the questions that we have?
Sorry, I just realised I was muted. So yeah, I'm going to go through them all, but I have some ones that I want you to put to one side and talk about. So obviously you talked about the women's ward and the J ward. Is there a kind of consistent paranormal activity that is, regardless of how many times you go there or who goes there, it is a very consistent experience? And if so, what are those kind of things that happen?
Okay. J ward, I will point out, J ward is actually a separate building. It's actually in town. If you're thinking about the forensic building, that's actually a separate thing to J ward. It's actually part of the asylum itself. J ward was, but it's actually way separate. It's actually, as I said, 2 kilometres away in town.
Okay.
But we have investigated there too. So there's just different locations. Just so people see it's different. Consistent. Well, there's always certain things there. Like, for example, I'll give you one example. In the staff quarters, if we were to go in there 95% of the time and we were using, say, a portal or a spirit box or something, and someone asked, what's Bill's wife's name, we will usually, as I said, 95% of the time get an answer that says Amanda. simply because I believe because Amanda was a nurse, there's a connection there, and they know her, and they hit that. So we get that. You always have your whispering. You'll hear the chatter in the background. You'll hear you'll see shadow people. Certain places you'll always feel heavy. The chapel, for example, is always heavy, and people come out of there saying, "Oh, I don't feel well," right? It's a heaviness, and that doesn't change. The only time I find people sense difference in the lot, or not pick up the same sort of thing, is daylight. Your senses aren't quite as heightened. At night, our senses are much more heightened, so that's when we're starting to see all these extra things. So there are through the whole location, you do have like your basic consistent things, which are present in a lot of places. As I said, whisperings, shadow people, your general things, but each part of that building is unique and has its own feeling.
Okay.
If that makes sense. Yeah.
So what is it used for now, Julie Boyd asks, and makes the comment that it would make a great hotel.
Well, that was my thoughts exactly. Actually, out the front of that building, there's actually a building off to the side, which was, its nickname was, and I shouldn't say this, its nickname was Shitty 9. And it was wards and that, but it was like for uncontrollable patients and that sort of thing. But it would be, that part would be a great hotel that you could set up and have people going into the asylum to do tours and things. But yeah, it would. And, for example, we have a prison here, which is the biggest prison in Victoria, called Pentridge. It shut down, and it's now got a hotel in there, apartments and buildings and shopping centres. It was a massive location, and I think the difference is this place is, as I said, probably nearly 3 hours from Melbourne in a small town. It would be the repairs and would be astronomical. So but yeah, I think that's probably the only reason it hasn't been sold off.
Fair enough. So Aslan asks here, did the dogs ever act like they had seen or heard anything? I think you mentioned it.
The police dogs, yeah. I don't know. I haven't been there when they've been training. I would imagine that they probably have, but they're quite highly trained. The police dogs, I suppose, same in the UK. These dogs are amazing. They think like humans. They're just amazing. But as we know, animals see a lot more than we do. They experience a lot more than we do with spirit. We have 4 cats in our house. I've never been a cat person, but just last couple of years or last 10 years, my family wanted cats, so we got some cats. But they have 1 foot in this world and 1 foot in the next, much more sensitive than people normally. But dogs are the same. Dogs see and hear and feel much more than we do. So I would imagine they have.
Yeah, I've certainly seen dogs react very strangely in some places, and they react to things that clearly aren't seen by us.
Absolutely. And sorry, just to reiterate on that, there's actually now a lot of people will actually take dogs on investigations because they react to certain things. But I think that's interesting, but I think it's a very fine line because a dog will also react to a mouse or a bug as well. So you'd have to be very careful how you read what they were reacting to.
I get you. Yeah. So my question here was, do the spirits and the ghosts there interact with each other? You mentioned the governor has a particular presence and a personality.
Yep.
Do other entities that you are encountering, do they behave differently when certain other spirits may be around? I think you did actually allude to this a little bit later.
Absolutely. No, absolutely. There's some spirits there that tend to overpower others. They tend to take over. So spirits that would normally talk to us, shut down or step back. Some will become more active. So, the women's ward is quite an interesting one. They tend to, I've found, like, being a male in there, and sometimes I'm in there on my own. Like I'll even if I'm doing a tour, I'll put people in cells and I'll be standing outside on my own. That there's quite a lot going on around me. Again, maybe because I was a male, maybe that mix of energy. So they do change. But when I've been there with a lot of females, it seems to be much more subdued. So they do change in the way they act.
Okay. So who is responsible for maintaining the location presently? You said it's used for film shoots and some of the buildings, other things.
It's actually owned by a university, and they look after it. They're obviously responsible for its maintenance, but it's also handled partly by the government. It needs so much work. It needs a lot of maintenance. We're just concerned that some parts are going to get to a point where it's too dangerous to enter. We have to obviously, look at, insurance purposes and things that, we're not taking people into locations where they can get hurt. So.
Do you not think about there's a really interesting dynamic of the dark tourist these days? That's something that's kind of coming to people who go to disaster zones, or they go to places that have a dark history. It could be they're going to Hiroshima just to feel the vibe, or they're Auschwitz or whatever. Well, do you think places like this draw not just those who are paranormal investigators, but those who are they like the kind of macabre space?
Absolutely. I places like prisons and asylums, that we tend to do a lot of work at, I believe they draw dark energies anyway, because because of mental illness, the things that, like in prisons, the things that people have done, darker energies are drawn to these places. But places like Hiroshima, Auschwitz, and such like that, I believe that they do draw a certain people there. Personally, myself, there's certain locations I wouldn't investigate as just out of respect. Where a lot of, for example, I don't believe I would ever investigate Auschwitz, simply because of it's hard to explain. In a war, for example, soldiers are fighting and they're dying, but they're soldiers. That's their job. Does that make sense? Sounds cold, but that's their job. But a place like Auschwitz, these were normal people that were taken there and were murdered. To me, there's a difference between that. For example, Gettysburg in Pennsylvania, there, the battlefield, I've investigated that numerous times, and I don't have a problem with it. But they were soldiers. That was their job. It's a horrible thing, and I hate war and I hate people. People shouldn't have to die for other men's ideas, but that's what that is. But places like Auschwitz, where civilians mostly were murdered. I think people are drawn to those places. They have that macabre ideology, maybe, but I think there's certain places we should not investigate.
Yeah, I get the vibe off that for sure.
Yeah.
Shall we draw our evening to a close then, or morning, I guess, in terms of yourself? Caroline, is there anything you wanted to round up with this evening? Or this morning?
Yes, we're just going to have a quick update on who we have next week. So on the 11th of September, which is next Thursday, we're going to have one of ASSAP's own executives, Steve Hume, and he'll be talking about sound recording techniques for field investigations. And then the following week after that, we've got the wonderful Penny Morgan, and she's going to be doing a talk for us, and 5 came home. So that'll be a nice double 2 weeks to look forward to for that. I am conscious of the time, Bill. Thank you again for a wonderful talk.
Thank you. And
it's been a pleasure catching up. But
yes,
thank you so much.
No problem.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, guys, let's have a good morning, a good evening, wherever it is that you might be. Make sure you have a great one this coming weekend, whatever it is you're going to be getting up to. So for ASSAP's Paranormal Webinar and Seriously Strange, let's bid everyone adieu. And I guess let's go get some food, maybe some breakfast in your case.
Thank you, guys.
All right, take care, everybody. Have a good night.
Thank you.